Go ahead and get your Bible to Esther chapter 3. Esther chapter 3. Hope everybody enjoyed their Christmas. And I know it's a difficult time for some, but for many it's a great time of the year. Esther chapter 3. Sunday nights, we recently started a 17 message series of random disconnected thoughts. This is just a third of those 17 because I spent 6 weeks talking about how to forgive and move on. And I never pray or ask God to help me preach a good message or a great message or any of that kind of stuff. But I do believe the truths that were put forth in those 6 weeks are some of those practical things to help people as Christians have joy and peace in their life. We will all be wronged by other people. It is an inevitable part of life in a fallen and broken world, and we will either handle it well when we're wronged and forgive and move on, or we will be a victim all of our lives. I would encourage everyone to take the time to listen to those and put them in your heart. One of the most common methods God uses to teach us is to reveal His will to us through people's stories. Most all of us love personal stories. I'm looking forward to hearing the two testimonies, Brother Harvey and Brother Mac's testimony on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to that. I love to hear personal stories. And so it's no surprise that God put a lot of personal stories in the Bible. Some are stories of people who are living by faith and doing well, and others are people who had faith in God who made bad decisions. God wanted us to understand how those things turn out. There are stories of unbelievers of all sorts, even unbelievers who were active adversaries to God and the things of God and God's people. And we can learn from their lives. We can learn how things turn out. Though some people refuse to learn any other way, God does not want His people to learn all of life's lessons the hard way. I hope that's not the way you learn everything. My old pastor used to say, people get too soon old and too late smart. And I don't want to be like that. I want to learn from the blessings of others, and so that I can be blessed. I want to learn from the pain of others so that I can avoid it. And one of the best things we do is we season in life a little bit, and is to watch how people's decisions turn out. It will help us make decisions. I believe one of the best goals that any of us has in life is to live with no regrets. To fully live like God taught us to live. To be fully invested in the people that God brought in our life. To have no regrets in our relationship with our spouse. To have no regrets in our relationship with our children. To whatever aspects of those things we control, to do that with no regrets. I'm talking about to make choices that reflect our faith rather than our fears. There's not a person here with faith that doesn't also have fears. And we're either going to make decisions that are focused on our faith or decisions that are controlled by our fears. I want to have no regrets. There's not a person here who doesn't want to live a life that God chooses to bless. To live with His satisfaction, His joy, His peace. Everybody here wants a happy and secure home. And if you're married, you want a marriage that is warm, committed, secure, supportive. Everybody here who has children, and one of your heart's desires is to have your children follow God in their life. Amen. To become productive human beings rather than leeches on society and people who just have nothing but trouble in their life. That's one of our heart's desires. Everybody wants those things. But some people will take no time and make no effort to figure out what produces those things. And for those who do take the time to figure out what produces a warm home and healthy relationships and children who become productive human beings, very often people don't want to do those things in their life because oftentimes they're not easy things to do. We have these desires in common. And it has saddened me to watch so many people live in a way that causes so many regrets as their future unfolds for them. Tonight I would like to consider a man who ruined his life. He ruined his life, he ruined the life of his family, he ruined the life of his wife, he ruined the life of his children. And nobody ever sets out to do that. Nobody. And yet all of us could make a list of names of people we know, of people who ruined their lives, who ruined their marriages, who ruined their children. Now, in this book of Esther, there is a man named Haman. He's mentioned 53 times in 45 verses. He's one of the most notorious men in all the Bible. He had a prominent position and great wealth, but he used it poorly. And he ended up destroying himself. He had a wife and 10 sons, but his sons ended up being hung publicly because of his influence. Now, that may not seem fair to some, but understand this, whether we like it or not, God designed families to go up and down together. When somebody in the family, especially a parent, goes up, everybody goes up. And when somebody in the family, especially a parent, goes down, everybody in the family goes down. Again, we like that biblical principle when somebody, particularly a parent, is going up, but we don't like it because it works both ways. God designed that bond between us when he picked our parents and our children. And Haman's wife, she ended up a widow. He was publicly shamed by the just act of a government. She was forced to watch her sons be executed and live on afterwards dealing with all that turmoil and grief. There's not a single person here who would say, wow, you know what, I would like my life to be like Haman's life. Nobody. Though Haman was not a believer in Jehovah, the things that destroyed him in his life would destroy ours too. And so what I'd like to do tonight is take a look at Haman's story and take a look at what destroyed Haman's life and his family and his marriage, and make sure that we keep these things out of our life as much as possible. Amen? Amen. You stand tonight in honor of the Word of God. If you're able to stand, the title of my message is How to Ruin Your Family and Future. How to Ruin Your Family and Future. Esther chapter 3, verse 1. And after these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman. The king had so commanded concerning him, but Mordecai bowed not, and nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, Why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass, when they spake daily to him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. And he thought scorn, thought it was nothing at all, not enough. He thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had shewed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. Thank you, might be seated. Now in Esther's day, the greatest kingdom on the face of the earth was the Persian kingdom. The Persian kingdom had united with the kingdom of the Medes to defeat the Babylonian Empire and take down the ancient city of Babylon. By the way, the ancient Persian Empire is modern-day Iran, and they're linked together. In verse 1, the most powerful man on the planet, the king of the Persians, a man named Ahasuerus, made a man named Haman his right-hand man. It said that he set him, he advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. What an incredible honor. Haman had a lot of power. He had a lot of wealth. He was very prominent. He was an influential man in the life of a great influencer. That was Haman. Oh, there goes my clock. Good thing we got one in the back, huh? I mean, imagine who Haman was as a person. He would have been very bright. He would have been highly educated. He would have been very gifted. He would have been very diligent. People do not rise to these kinds of positions of secular power without having character and having giftedness. And whenever you and I think that the adversaries of biblical morality are all just stupid, we're going to err. They're not stupid. They're just ungodly. Haman was a very gifted human being. But because of such a lofty position in the government, people bowed in reverence to Haman when he came by. And that's what it says in verse 2. All the king's servants said when the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman. For the king had so commanded concerning him. That's everybody bowed but Mordecai. It says Mordecai bowed not nor gave him reverence. Now in those days, the most prominent people and the judges of the land, they sat in the gate, in particular the king's gate. And if you wanted justice done on some subject, you went to the gate, and those people were the judges who had been appointed to handle your case. And so the wisest and the most powerful and prominent people bowed to Haman. And the king had commanded that to be so. Now, we're not really directly told why Mordecai refused to bow to Haman in direct defiance to the king. But Mordecai he stood in back, so it wasn't really obvious. And so he just didn't bow when he came by. We're not sure why he didn't do that, but it was most likely had to do with the fact that Haman was an anti-Semite. He hated the Jews. And because of his lineage, we read that in verse 1, he was an Agagite. And you may remember in the story of King Saul, the first king of Israel, he was commanded by God to get rid of all the Amalekites, to wipe them out because of some things they had done to the Jews. And Saul, in disobedience to God, had spared their king, and he was a man by the name of Agag. And so Haman is actually in this lineage of the Amalekites who had done some bad things to Israel over the course of their history, and he was in the royal lineage of the man that Saul had spared until Samuel hewed him to pieces with a sword. That would have been interesting. But that's who he was. Now at first, Haman seems to not have noticed. Like I said, Mordecai likely stood in the back, but some big mouths, people have never changed. Some big mouths brought that to Haman's attention. Notice in verses 3 and 4. Then the king's servants, which are the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, Why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass when they spake daily to him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman, to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. He said, Brother Waller, why'd you call him big mouths? I'm calling him big mouths because the information they passed on to Haman wasn't something that Haman needed to know. There was no purpose in passing that information on for any reason other than hurting Mordecai, getting him in trouble. By the way, I would to God that all of God's people would let all gossip and hurtful things they hear stop with them. Instead of telling someone what they heard. Did you hear what such and so said about you? How about instead of listening, why don't you say, no, I didn't. And if I don't need to know it, I don't want to hear it. Now, some of these big mouths had tried to talk sense into Mordecai for days, but Mordecai was a hardhead. And he refused to listen to their warnings, and he just continued to refuse to bow. I mean, who knows why he really did this? I mean, think about that. I mean, he bowed to King Ahasuerus. King Ahasuerus was not a Jewish king. He was no big lover of the Jews. He was not a just and righteous man. But Mordecai bowed to him and even did some things to get the king's life spared. But he just had this thing for Haman, and he just stubbornly refused to bow. He stubbornly held Haman responsible for some ancient atrocities of the Amalekites. But notice what happens when Haman is made aware of what happens in verse 5. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed down, because he hadn't seen it prior to that, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. Now James tells us that the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. And all that simply means is that you and I are not going to do what's right when we're angry. There are very few things that shut our ears and close our eyes more quickly than anger. There are very few things that cause us to open to our mouths and say things we shouldn't say more quickly than anger. The wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. And upon seeing this, after hearing about it, Haman just gets filled with wrath that Mordecai will not bow. By the way, the Bible says, be ye angry and sin not. Let not your son go down upon your wrath. You know, some of the best marriage advice you will ever get is don't go to bed angry. Now say, well, I'll just stay up and fight then. No, maybe you ought to just let it go. So some of the best life advice we would get, if we just kind of take that to its logical conclusion, is that none of us should be angry for more than a few hours about something. Just let it go. You say, how can I? How about you got to want to not be angry, and how about you talk to God about it? Now, under the influence of his anger, Satan inspired Haman to plot the destruction of all the Jews in the kingdom. In verse 6, he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they'd shoot him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. Now that's pretty irrational, but such is the behavior of those who are filled with wrath. To destroy an entire people group because one man from that people group refuses to bow to you. See, Haman was not only an unbeliever, he was an unbeliever acting badly. Now, it's unlikely he really would have known the details of any of the laws of the Jews, but certainly in his own conscience, he knew it was wrong to take innocent life. Our conscience, by virtue of the design of our Creator, bears witness to the fact that human life is valuable. So Haman knew he was doing what was wrong, but he went ahead because he was so angry, and he did it anyway. Look, I don't know how many Jews there were in the kingdom. 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, who knows? Thousands and thousands of people. And to make the rest of the story short, God intervened through Esther to spare the Jews and caused Haman and his family to be destroyed. Haman had a powerful position and prominence and wealth and life, but he used it poorly, and he ended up destroying himself. Haman had a wife and 10 sons, but his sons ended up publicly executed by a just act of the government. Haman's wife ended up a widow after he was publicly shamed and executed. Haman did all of this to himself and his family. And there's no sensible person here that wants to see this happen to anyone, but especially not ourselves. God put this story here for us to help us, so that we see the things in Haman's life and we have enough sense to say, do you know what? I don't want that end, and so I'm not going to have that recipe. What do we see in Haman's life that brought this kind of destruction that none of us want? What do I need to avoid to keep this from happening to me? Here's number one. He had a vengeful spirit to those with whom he disagreed. We read that in verse 6. He thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai, then showed him the people of Mordecai, and he sought to destroy all the Jews in the whole kingdom. That was not justice. It's not justice to destroy a whole race of people because one man refused to bow down. And by the way, one of the most important qualities of leadership of any sort is justice. Now, it might have been legal to do that because it was an absolute monarchy, and if Ahasuerus said do that, it would have been legal. But understand, though it was legal, it was not just. It's not just to take a man's life for them refusing to bow down. I mean, have you ever thought about it? There are a lot of other penalties that he could have used. I mean, he could have thrown him in jail until he agreed to bow down. He could have just taken away his position of honor. He was Mordecai stood in the gate too. He could have taken him away from that. So listen, you're not going to come back and be a judge in the gate until you properly bow down and follow the king's instructions. He could have fined him hundreds of pieces of silver. See, this was an act of pure vengeance and hatred on Haman's part, and it had nothing to do with justice or good leadership. You see, at the root, this was really just a disagreement over the proper response to the king's right-hand man walking by. That's really all this was. This was about a lawful command from a lawful government that did not contradict God's laws. Mordecai should have bowed. Have you ever stopped to think about this? Disagreement with people in our life is inevitable. Disagreements are normal. In fact, though you may not agree with this, at times disagreements are even healthy. Have you ever thought about how difficult it is just to blend the lives of a husband and wife who have to divide their finances and raise their children when the most important things to all of us are our money and our kids? Have you ever thought about how hard it is to do that? Disagreements are inevitable. While husbands and wives, but what husbands and wives do when they disagree either makes a marriage and a home secure and happy, or it makes it a minefield of yelling and spiteful remarks and coldness. It's impossible for any parent who's actually trying to provide leadership for their children to not have their children disagree with their leadership. God gave children parents on purpose. And what parents and children do when they have the inevitable disagreements of life, that's either going to make a home secure and happy or a minefield of yelling and spiteful remarks and coldness. Listen, it is impossible for you and I, as a spiritual leader in this church, it's impossible for us to not disagree either. Just like your ministry leader, whatever ministry you work in, it is impossible for us not to have disagreements. It's going to happen. But what people and spiritual leaders do when they disagree either will make Bible Baptist Church secure and happy, or it is going to make this place a minefield of spiteful remarks and coldness. Now, you may like to disagree with people, but I don't personally like it. But we all need to simply accept that disagreements are an inevitable thing between us and our spouse, and us and our children, and us and other people at Bible Baptist Church. I would even go so far to say is that if you never disagree, that's likely not good for anybody. See, disagreeing in bad ways hurts us. It dishonors God. But disagreeing in healthy ways that show respect for someone's position and someone's personhood, that helps everybody. It is not okay to just become vengeful and spiteful. Listen, if you're somebody who, like Haman, when they have an honest disagreement with someone, if instead of working through that disagreement and facing that disagreement, or disagreeing to move on to agreeing to disagree, listen, if you are someone who is vengeful and spiteful, understand, you are going to destroy something that matters to you. You are going to destroy yourself. You're going to destroy your home. You're going to destroy your children. Vengefulness and spitefulness always in the end produce something we do not want. Do you have it out for anyone? Is there anybody you're just looking to get back at? That's what vengeance is. And I'm just saying that if you have that in your heart and in your mind, you, with the grace of God, you need to get that out of your mind because you're going to hurt something. It's how Haman destroyed himself and his family. But that isn't all that was in the recipe for Haman destroyed himself. Notice in chapter 3, verse 8 and 9, it says, And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There's a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. Neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries. Here's the second thing. Haman destroyed himself and his family because he harbored racial hatred in his heart. We saw it before as he took the actions out of one Jew against an entire race of people. Here we see him go to King Ahasuerus, and he offers the equivalent of today's about $2.5 million of his own money for the sole purpose of destroying a people group. Listen, there has always been and will always be an irrational hatred of the Jewish people. They are chosen people in God's sight. That doesn't mean they're saved. Doesn't mean they're going to go to heaven when they die. Listen, if they die outside of Christ, they will go to hell just like a Gentile who dies outside of Christ. But that nation and that people group are chosen and special in God's sight. And what that means is that God handles them in a special way as a people group. And it also means that Satan hates them in a special way. And hatred for people groups who are not, quote, our people, that doesn't stop with Haman's hatred of the Jews. There are whites that hate blacks and blacks that hate whites. And people act as if the act of one individual from a certain people group is reflective of a whole group. I just want to tell you, that attitude destroys people. That was Haman's attitude in this situation. His racism, his vengeance, his lack of having all these things under control. It destroyed him. In reality, there is no such thing of races of people based on skin color. All races of people simply have a different amount of melanin in their skin. And if somebody doesn't have any melanin, they're an albino and they have pink eyes. Well, that's true. It's a genetic defect. All the rest of us are the same people group. Whether we like it or not, every human being is a descendant in one way or another from Adam and Eve. Whether we like it in one way or another, we are all descendants of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, his 3 sons and their 4 wives. All the genetic information that is caused all the differences between the people groups, that was all in Adam and Eve. That was all in Noah's family as well, and those daughter-in-laws. Keep your hand, go up in your Bible to Acts chapter 17. Paul in Acts 17, as I mentioned this morning, and our servant was preaching in the Greek city of Athens. He's preaching to a bunch of religious people, in particular a bunch of intellectual snobs who had nothing better to do than sit and hear or tell some new thing. And notice what he says there in Acts 17, verse 26. It says, And that God hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on the face of the earth, hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation. All nations are just one blood. Right. Listen, they don't, when you get blood, it has nothing to do with the race that you have or the race it came from. We are all descendants, and you go back to our text, of Adam and Eve, and then Noah and his 3 sons and their wives. Now, I do not believe that racism in America is anywhere near as bad as it was prior to the 1960s But understand it still exists. And it will always exist. But racism has no place here.
Amen.
It has no place in the work of God or among the people of God. People deserve to be judged on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. And harboring racism in your heart will inevitably come out as you live and raise your children, and it will ultimately destroy both you and them. And so I plead with you tonight, if you're somebody who has racism you're harboring in your heart or mind, and you lump people together instead of considering people as individuals regardless of the race that they're from, you need to get rid of that before it destroys you and your family. But that isn't all that destroyed Haman. That isn't all that was in the recipe that produced this man who had an end that was so contrary to the end that any of us want to have. Excuse me, I need to drink something. I'm not the kind of stuff Joe drinks. I'm going to drink water. I'm sorry, Brother Joe drinks. It was a sad day in my life when I had to stop drinking Mountain Dew from my Duke cup. Water, there. Go to Esther chapter 5. For those of you who love to drink water, there's people here, you probably drink a gallon of water a day. You're a sicko. Notice this particular trait of Haman to make sure we don't have it in our life. We need to get any vengefulness and spitefulness out. We need to get any racism we harbor out. Notice in Esther chapter 5, verse 9. It says, Then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children and all the things wherein he had, where the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. It's pretty braggadocious there too. Is that a word? Verse 12, Haman said, Moreover, yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also the king. Look at this, verse 13. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Here's the third thing. He was out of focus on what he had versus what he did not have. See, he didn't see all the people that bowed. He saw one guy that didn't. He didn't see the respect he got from all the people who showed him respect. All he saw was disrespect from one person. We don't even know how many hundreds of people bowed to Haman, but the one man who did not outweighed them all. In fact, he was so out of focus, he says that all this, all of my glory, all of my position, all of my wealth, all of these things that I have, all my wife and 10 children, I can't get any joy from any of that as long as that one guy refuses to bow. You see, his racism, vengeance, and lack of focus poisoned not only his mind, but the mind of his wife. Look at verse 14. Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, Let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high. That's 75 feet. By the way, this room here is 25 feet. And so, it wasn't a day of skyscrapers. I mean, this gallows probably towered over every building in the area, if not every building, period. She says, Let a gallows be made 50 cubits tall, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king, that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou merrily with the king unto the banquet, and the thing pleased Haman, he caused the gallows to be made. By the way, that was his wife's And his spitefulness and his vengeance and his lack of focus had polluted his wife's heart as well. Now for you and I today to read about Haman being so obsessed with Mordecai's unwillingness to bow, it just seems crazy to us. But if you and I aren't careful, we will allow one thing we don't like or one thing we disagree with poison our hearts and mind, just like it happened to Haman. See, if you and I are not careful, we'll let one thing from a sermon we don't like cause us to ignore the 50 things that were helpful.
That's good. That's right.
Well, I didn't like the way he said that.
Right.
I didn't like the way he said this morning that, if you don't like the concealed carry laws, go to somewhere else.
Amen.
And you just ignore anything else I say because you didn't like one thing. If we're not careful, we'll let one thing about a person that we don't like outweigh 50 good things.
True.
Isn't it really a shame that when we talk about somebody, I find myself doing this. You go to preachers' conferences or something, and you're talking to some other Christian, you say, oh, well, I really like this, but I don't like him about that. I mean, we can't even say a positive sentence without pointing out the one thing we don't like. And they're poisonous. If we're not careful, we'll let the one thing we don't like about our boss or job take prominence over the 50 things we like.
True, right?
I remember years ago, I was in some manager's meeting, some training meeting, and there were about 25 or 30 of us there around on these tables, and they asked everybody to go around and talk about what they thought about their job. And I was about 15th maybe out of 25 or 30, and the first 14 people, they all talked about how they didn't like this about the company, and they didn't like this about their job, and it got to me, and I said, I don't know why you people stay here. I said, I've worked for 3 other companies, and I got to tell you, I don't ever remember working for a better company. I said, there's stuff I don't like, but you know what? There's so much I like about this job, I want to just let you know, I'm really glad I'm allowed to work here. And all the first 14 people looked at me like I had 3 eyes, and everybody after me talked positively about how they liked their job. And it really is this thing, if we are not careful, we will let one thing poison us. Listen, you can have that happen with you and your spouse. You can have 50 things you love about them, and you can have that one thing that they do that just rubs you raw, and you can let that override everything you love about them that's good.
That's true.
By the way, when you were dating, that stinking stuff was there too, and you just overlooked it because you loved them so much. One thing, listen, it can corrupt us in every area of life. It will corrupt us in churches. We regularly have people leave Bible Baptist Church. I don't like this, and I don't like that, and I don't like you. I know. My wife does it most of the time. Listen, you can either find and focus on the things that you have and the things that are good, or you can let one thing corrupt and poison your mind, and that's what Haman did, and he did not allow himself to enjoy his wife, his children, his wealth, his position, because that one thing ruined him. One of the great things about our God is that He's able to focus on the video of our life instead of snapshots. Have you ever really went through the Hebrews 11 Hall of Fame of Faith and really thought about the people that He lists as being examples of great faith? See, you and I wouldn't put Noah on there because after the flood, Noah went and got drunk. And you and I wouldn't put Abraham on there because, you know what, he went to Egypt and he shouldn't have stayed in, and went to Egypt, he should have stayed in Canaan, and he let his wife talk him into having Hagar, which may have not taken a lot of persuasion anyway, to have her to bring him children. We wouldn't put him in there either. And Sarah we wouldn't put in there because when God told her that she was supposed to name her son Isaac, she laughed. And we wouldn't put Moses in there because he murdered the Egyptian and because he was a hothead. And listen, our whole world has corrupted us. You know, we live in a society that will take something somebody did 30 and 40 years ago when they were 18 or 20 or 22, and now for decades they've been doing something different, and they bring this out to us like, wow, we should not trust them. They did that 30 years ago. That's stupid. And what makes it even worse is a lot of times that person who's bringing out that dirt, they know good and well that they were dumb when they were young too. Now, I'm not advocating being dumb or doing sinful things when we're young. I'm not advocating that at all. I'm just saying we need to watch ourselves or we will get out of focus on one thing and it'll cause us not to see what's good. Listen, one guy failing to bow down is not an offense that is so large that it outweigh everything else in our life. If you're tonight somebody who's out of focus of what's good in people, what's good in organizations, what's good in your spouse, what's good in your children, you know, listen, one of the healthiest things you'll do, if you're a parent, you will go through seasons where you just want to mangle them. I'm talking about you just want to... You feel like that too sometimes, don't lie. And if you don't, in those times, just pause and think about all the things you actually love about them. You will never respond rightly to them. If you're somebody who's out of focus, please stop. You're going to destroy yourself and your family. And lastly, chapter 6, verse 6. It says, so Haman came in, and the king said to him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than myself? That's a pretty selfish, prideful thing too. Verse 7, Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth on, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback to the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor. Here's the fourth and final quality of Haman. He had a really shallow view of what mattered. I mean, think about that. The king gives you the option that you think is going to come back to you. What would you do to honor him? And he is so shallow that the most important thing to him was a short-term group of his peers watching him ride around with the king's robe and the king's horse. That's pretty shallow. Pretty short-term. I mean, why didn't he say, well, you know what, I would love if you've got a guy, I want you to find out what their favorite cause is and build them a building or give them some money. Or, why don't you do this, King Ahasuerus? Why don't you build a statue with you and them and have your arm around them? I mean, think about how shallow you have to be to think that the most important way to be honored is to have a group of your peers just think, wow, there he goes in the king's robe with the king's horse. Wow. You know, you will destroy yourself and those you love if you have a shallow view of what really matters in life. So, Brother Wally, what really matters in life? Be saved. What really matters in life? I am faithful to Christ. What really matters in life? Do I have a good relationship with my spouse? What really matters in life? Do I have a good relationship with my children? What really matters in life? Do I really have a good relationship with my parents? What matters in life? Am I an influencer for Christ? Good and right? Am I light in the circle of my life? That's what really matters. And all that other stuff about what your peers think, you know, it's very short-lived. The fact of the matter is, it's easy for any of us to get out of focus and to invest ourselves disproportionately on things that will not matter in eternity or very much matter in life. If you are someone with a shallow view of what matters, if you're focused on your wealth, on your promotion, on your popularity, listen, you're headed for trouble. You end up destroying not only yourself, but the people that mean the most to you. So, well, what should I do? Nurture a merciful and gracious spirit. What should I do? Consider everyone on the content of their character instead of the color of their skin or the people group to whom they belong. What should I do? Nurture, focusing on what's good in people and what you have instead of what you wish you had. Brother Waller, what should I do? Prioritize what really matters from your heart. Because in the end, we will do what we're supposed to do if we are who we're supposed to be. Amen?
Amen.
And I just say to you tonight in closing, live a life that matters. Leave a legacy of faith, love, character, instead of destruction in your wake. And that's what Haman did. Please don't do that. If you'd stand tonight, bow your head, close